I think it really hit me. And even at, at all of these pitches, I've been the only female that's pitched
Yeah.
at most of the competitions.
Yeah.
And it feels a bit like a superpower. Like it feels really, I feel very empowered by it.
Okay, guys, welcome to the Blumex podcast. Today we have a great shout out to mention. Shout out to MCRO for becoming a continuing sponsor for the podcast. So this episode and future episodes is going to be brought to you by MCRO, who enables businesses to grow through handcrafted digital solutions of the future. MCRO is a web and mobile app development studio with a competent, dedicated, and experienced team focused on solving business challenges through fast to market and producing high-performance digital products. If you're looking to turn your destructive ideas into reality or have a reliable strategic tech partner to explore options with for your existing work or for new work, reach out to us and we'll make the introduction for MCRO, and you can have the conversation over a coffee or a Bone Shaker IPA, your choice. Okay, Serena.
Hey, Ravi.
How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Perfect. So thank you for waiting. I know you got a little held up from the last one. We were wrapping up.
No worries. I had a book. That was good.
Yeah, perfect. So, I mean, I really appreciate you coming here because this is really last minute booking. We actually had an opening come up and we met Thursday at IGAN's Pitch to Heal pitch competition, right? Where you pitched for $250,000.
Yes.
How was that? How do you feel?
It was.
Let's start right there.
Yeah, let's just dive in. It was a crazy experience. It was super cool. We were, as a company, super excited to be there. We've been talking to IGAN for quite a while. We met them at CDO. And so we're in the midst of fundraising, and this 250 would have been really, really nice to help us close the round. But fortunately, we didn't win it. But everyone at IGAN still seems super keen to continue conversations, and we got a whole bunch of new leads from that.
Absolutely.
We're kind of following out now, and so it was a great opportunity to get up there and pitch, and I actually think it might have been the largest venue that I've pitched at.
Yeah? No, that was a great place.
Yeah.
They really decked it out nice too, right?
And they did a good job,
Yeah. Okay, let's get a little bit back into what your project is. Quthero.
Quthero.
Right? Super cool application. I mean, one of the things I really appreciated from Thursday was how good of a pitch yours was.
Thank you.
So I've seen a few pitch competitions now, and you were really passionate up there. You really knew your stuff. You were really articulate. You clearly knew your material. You're the chief science officer of the
Chief
company.
Scientific Officer, Senior Scientist. It's a startup. My role changes daily, and the product manager.
Perfect.
But I've been working on the science for 2 years as a master's student. And my prof, Dr. Malatsa Radicic, who's also our CEO, I've been in her lab for 2 years. And so I think when it was time to kind of shift into more of a prominent role in the company and actually start pitching, because I was so familiar with a lot of the science behind it, it's so easy for me to get up on stage and talk about this, because this is something that I've had to present for school a whole bunch of times in very different settings and forums. And so I think I almost have the reverse problem of a lot of people, where some people, sometimes CEOs or people with business background, will struggle with the science or the technology, but the business part is a little bit newer for me. And so that's kind of where I maybe struggle a bit, but I'm learning lots, and so it's been great.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting hearing from a med tech company. 'Cause that's what you guys are. You're creating a technology, right? And instead of apps, it's more. Is it biological based? Is it? Let's get into the company. How about that, right? Let's talk more about Quthero. What do you guys do?
So we make a biomaterial for rapid wound healing, and we're trying to change the way that we heal wounds by not only accelerating them, but also reducing scarring. And so you'll hear of a lot of products, that might work really well to speed up your rate of healing, but they don't really care at all about the scar or what might be there afterwards. We want to kind of come in and we recognize that scarring is a big deal for a lot of people. Whether it be something from a surgery or even one of these non-healing chronic wounds or something as simple as a cosmetic feature, no one really wants to have a scar, and there's nothing wrong with it. But at the end of the day, the society we live in, everyone wants to have this beautiful, perfect skin, and so trying to create or commercialize this product that has been in development for almost 12 years now. So trying to get it out of the lab into the clinic where we can have an impact on people who really, really need it.
Yeah.
Non-healing chronic wounds are a big issue for a lot of populations of people. And on the flip side of that, even just having a product that, someone who is having more of a cosmetic procedure or even something as standard as a C-section could apply this to reduce their scarring.
It's really amazing because your pitch deck was so powerful in explaining how effective of a solution you guys are, and compared to especially to what's going on in the market space. So let's talk about that in a medtech company like yours. How did that start? Like, where is this coming from? Like, this is a research that's being commercialized, right?
Yep. So our CEO is a professor at the University of Toronto, and she's professor in chemical engineering.
That's her over here?
That's her right there, Mandla.
Okay, perfect.
So she's a professor at the University of Toronto in chemical engineering and the Institute of Biomaterials and Biomedical Engineering. And so she works predominantly in cardiac research as well as biomaterials. And 12 years ago, she started to work with this material that we're trying to commercialize, and they used it in a bunch of different applications and really started to make a lot of progress with respect to the cardiac space. And using it as a therapeutic after a heart attack, for instance. And so we did a bunch of studies in small animals and saw that it was really effective at reducing scarring in your heart, which is pretty rare after a heart attack. But unfortunately, that path to market is pretty convoluted. There's really no one doing it, and there's really no defined path. And so when we wanted to think about how else could we get this to market, the wound healing path is a lot more simpler and clear. And when we used it in a wound healing setting, it also worked really, really well. And so trying to move forward with that.
Absolutely. So I'm just scrolling through your website over here, trying to put some visuals to what you're saying, because it's such a powerful concept, all right, what your ability to do here. So you were part of this research team.
Yes.
So you personally, you got involved. You're a master's student at the time.
Yeah,
right?
so I was a master's student at the time. I was doing my master's with Mandla, and when it came time to choose a project, she gave me a couple of different options, and this was one of them. And they had just published a paper on their wound healing application, and I think she'd started to get a lot of feedback from people that this might actually be a viable commercialization opportunity. And she was like, this is a project. There's like room for you to work on this clinical translation and get involved with the company, but like absolutely no stress if like that's not something you want to do.
Yeah.
She was really, really great actually, and wasn't pushy, which was nice. But
so what was the relationship there? Like, were you working under her at the time? Were you?
Yeah, so as a grad student in Biomaterials and Biomedical Engineering at U of T, there are a couple of different master's programs. I was doing a research-based master's, and so I had to write a thesis at the end of the process. And so you usually pick a prof that you want to work with. They'll kind of give you a project, and you go from there. And so this is one of the projects. And when I started working on it, I spent like the first 6 months of my master's doing what most master's students do, just trying to like figure out what's going on and define your project. And then once I kind of settled into that and the company kind of started to form, I started to get a little bit more involved in kind of communicating with our old CEO at the time, and started to be more involved in a lot of the business meetings. And it ended up being something that I really, really liked and I found really interesting and seemed like a viable career pathway. And so when I finished my master's, we were at this place now. I just finished a couple months ago, but we were at this place where we were like right at the precipice of funding, and now we're right in the middle of it. And so it was just a really exciting time, and I had to jump into that and kind of see this through and see what happens.
Amazing. So you finish your master's with this research commercialization process, dealing with that. So was that like a normal process that most people go through, or do you get to see something new here? Right, of how to see an existing technology being commercialized, right?
I think I definitely had a unique master's experience, which I'm really grateful for. I think most students will typically do the research, get their thesis, and kind of move on from there. And I think it was just this good happenstance of timing of this research, there were many grad students before me that worked to develop it, and it being at a place where it really was ready to get out of the clinic.
Yep.
And me kind of being there at the right time, and my prof presenting this opportunity, and then just along the way, U of T is, well, I'm sure you guys are aware, has so many different incubators, and so they're doing a good job of trying to be a place that gets research out of the lab, which is greatly appreciated, and I think it's a big problem in biomedical engineering, and where a lot of this research kind of stays in the lab, and it's so hard to get it out, and so it's nice that U of T is starting to try to help with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty new to hear, right? Like these companies now spinning out from like a different side than tech. Yeah, usually tech gets all the attention.
Yeah.
Right? You create this app product, it comes out. How does it look like when it comes out of like such a research focused department or a stream of academia, right?
It's a little bit different. Med tech as well. In med tech, in the sense of like you actually trying to create a diagnostic or a therapeutic, is a completely different field and game from kind of this word tech that we hear all the time. Oftentimes you need a lot of capital really early on in order to get anything out of the lab, and you end up caught in this like chicken and egg scenario where you'll approach a VC and they'll say, oh, we want you to be on a market before we invest in you. But then you're like, okay, but I need money to do that, to do the clinical trial, to get to the market, to talk to you. And so it's a little bit difficult. And I think there are starting to be more angels within Toronto and VCs such as IGAN, for instance, that are starting to put more money into earlier stage companies, and incubators as well that are really helping to foster these younger startups, and are even helping to teach profs a lot of the business words. A lot of professors don't know that, and even their students don't necessarily don't know what a venture capitalist is, for instance, or how do you do evaluation. So I think you just have a very different group of people who are trying to go through this and trying to learn a lot of these things.
So how do you learn all that?
By being exposed to it.
Okay.
And so the first incubator we were part of was UTest.
Yep.
And they were really great because they paid for me to go to the Mars workshops. So in the summer, Mars has a bunch of workshops pretty much on how to start a startup, and they talk about, company valuation, business model development, how do you do your finances, and I was really grateful that within the company, my prof and our CEO at the time was like, this would be a great opportunity for you to learn, and so I got to go to these classes for free, which typically cost quite a decent amount of money for a startup, for instance, or even someone who's interested in learning, and that certainly helped. And then really just when we went through CDL this past year, just kind of being thrown into that and thrown into this world of hearing these different words and then like pulling out my phone, Googling it, and then being like, okay, yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I went through the same thing because I actually did my undergrad in neuroscience and psychology. So super like scientific field. And then the last company I tried to build was like a tech company.
Yeah.
I had no idea of how to do that. So the business side of tech plus the actual tech side of tech, that itself is a challenge, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of get paralyzed by these unknowns. What you don't know, you don't even know. And it seemed like every time, I did the same thing, write these words down as I hear them.
Yeah.
Start writing questions as it pops in my head. Every time you answer these questions, more things come up because it's a never-ending process of learning.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, did you ever feel like it's pulling you away from your main focus, which was the science side of things that you were interested in, or was this like something you wanted to learn, or the price you had to pay to get what you had to do?
Yeah. I mean, I think it was definitely something that I wanted to learn. I knew when I went into my master's, and I had the opportunity to switch and stay in and continue to do a PhD, but I'm not particularly interested in being in academia for a long time, and didn't know if a PhD would be worth it just because I kind of like the environment. And so it was really nice and I think a big sigh of relief actually for me to be able to have this master's that very much involved both worlds, where I could kind of still stay in this environment that I know and that I really, really love, that being the science, while also being able to kind of dip my hand in the pot of the business world, assuming, like, under the assumption that I would eventually one day kind of shift over to that. And it seems to be a pretty good fit thus far.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's backtrack a little bit more to the actual project. Quthero,
Yes.
right? Let's talk about the actual research, what it actually does. That's a little different. How does the actual science part of work?
So we have this biomimetic peptide. So a peptide is a short sequence of amino acids. They make up your proteins.
Yeah. Flashback. Okay, I remember this.
Yeah. And so we have this short sequence that's found in nature, and it's conserved amongst species. And so, we humans have it, mice have it, pigs have it. So most animals have this species, and so that kind of implies that it's important for some reason. Nature's decided to keep it around, and so 12 years back, someone within our lab had identified this as potentially being important, and we used chemistry techniques to attach it to a collagen chitosan biomaterial, and found that when this sequence was directly attached to this collagen chitosan biomaterial, we had efficacy in a number of different tissues. And so in the context of wounding and skin, for instance, your skin cells or keratinocytes, they really like to grab onto it. They're very sticky cells that crawl around. And so when they were able to grab onto the sequence, we found that they were able to migrate really, really effectively in a way that we see in other species.
Yep.
And so this was kind of where this whole wound healing application was born, was from observing this in the lab, and then, wondering, okay, well, we've seen efficacy in, a number of different cells and models before. If we use this in a model of wound healing, will we continue to see these same effects? And we did. And so we were really excited about that, and have kind of moved forward from there.
Perfect. And this is all in a laboratory environment, like.
Yeah. All of this has been done out in U of T, in a lab there.
Perfect. And how long was the research taking? Like, how long does the whole process look like?
So for the wound healing application, I believe we've been working on it for, I want to say, roughly 5-6 years.
5-6 years.
It's been quite some time in the making, and that's not uncommon for a lot of like medical device therapeutic. And even for us, we're a medical device, and so our pathway to humans is a lot shorter than something like a drug or a biologic, for instance. And so it still sounds like a super long time. You spend 6 years in the lab before you can even get to a point where you're allowed to use it on humans, and then from that point onwards, it's still a couple of years before it's available for everyone.
Absolutely. No, it's really fascinating to understand the business side of scientific research, right? Like, you normally think of this being, going through academia. You establish write a paper and you go and get get yourself published and stuff like that. But you guys went beyond to actually create something to solve a problem. Now, did it start off like that? Was it, okay, this is a problem, we're going to go find a solution for it? Or was it like some kind of research that came across in the laboratory environment? They're like, oh, this is a lot of potential. Yeah. Let's focus on this.
In our case, I believe that we had stumbled across this first. Again, this is predating me even being in university. And so I think we had stumbled across this sequence initially. And since my prof predominantly does cardiac research, our first instinct was to use it in a cardiac setting. Okay. And so to see how, your heart cells would react to it. And so I think it was duly motivated by acknowledging that there really isn't any therapeutic if you have a heart attack. There's not much that can be done to save that tissue. Okay. So that is a big motivation for a lot of her research, is trying to develop new biomaterials or new strategies to solving that. So that's kind of where this research was born. So it's a little bit of both, a little bit of us, a little bit of some happenstance, stumbling upon it through an educated approach. Obviously, we didn't just pull letters out from a hat.
Yeah.
There's a lot of science to back up why this sequence and this material works. And the heart and cardiac research is something that's just very near and dear to her. And so we started with that. And then I think in trying to investigate why it worked so well in a cardiac sense, hypothesized that, it might actually work well in a lot of different tissue types for some of the reasons we had uncovered.
So the initial research wasn't necessarily focused on this. It's more meant to be more, because it came across an opportunity as a possibility while researching a particular about heart tissues.
Yeah.
Right. And then the potential became, this is what this peptide can be used for. So what is this peptide? Like where is it found? Like,
so
can you talk about that?
Yes, I can. Yeah. This research is founded out of science, and so most of this is on the internet, but it's an angiopoietin-1 mimetic peptide.
Okay.
And so angiopoietin-1 is involved in, it's a protein involved in vascularization and a whole bunch of other things. And so there's this small sequence in something called the fibrinogen domain, and fibrinogen is kind of like a sticky protein. Cells really like it. They like sticking to it. And so the small sequence within that fibrinogen domain was shown to kind of preserve some of the stickiness that we see with this fibrinogen peptide. And we were able to still kind of have some of these similar downstream mechanical modes of action in like having cells that want to stick to this. Cool.
That really challenged my memory of biology, but that's really fascinating. So okay, you came across this great potential came out of this research. You guys are building this. Now what? Like, UFT says, hey, this is great tech. Like, how did that work in the environment? Usually, institutions seem to be working at a very slow pace.
Yeah.
Right, but.
I mean, UFT certainly moves at a much slower pace than what a lot of startups
bureaucracy,
do. Yeah,
right? Yeah.
It's such a large institution. It's going to move a lot slower than a company of 2 people, 2.5 people. And so I think it really honestly has, from the day of inception of this company was roughly fall of 2017 to now, it really has taken us probably about a solid year to a year and a half to really get at a place where things are starting to ramp up, and we're at a place where a relationship with the university is supportive, and we're able to move forward with all of our patents in place and our IP. And so I think having some of these incubators as well to act as advocates for us when we approach U of T regarding patents was really helpful, or even just hearing their advice as to what a potential investor might want to see with your patent portfolio was really helpful for us when we turned back to U of T and said, well, let's make this work for both of us.
So how does that process work when you're like coming out of a university environment, institutional environment where you're developing research and you're birthing out a new company, a private entity meant to make money? What are the checkboxes that need to be filled? Who needs to be informed? Like, what I'm trying to figure out is like, how hard is it to do? Right? Is it a process? Like,
I mean, I think it's a bit of a process. U of T is great. They really want to foster a lot of this, but they also still want to be involved. And but they're a little bit too large to move at the rate that you want them. And so we personally had a bit of a sticky issue with our patents and just ensuring that we had them in the right place. We've been able, through just like skillful, prolonged negotiations, have been able to get to a point. But typically when you file IP with U of T, you have to disclose it first. And then from that point, you can either choose to file it, or you can choose for U of T to file it, pay all the fees, or you can have immediate assignment to yourself as an inventor. And so then you would have to pay to file it and get a lawyer, et cetera. And so there's pros and cons to this. One being, if U of T does it, you don't have to pay that upfront cost. It's a little bit easier. But then you later have to negotiate either exclusive licensing or what some milestone payments might be. Whereas if you do immediate assignment, you've already disclosed, U of T knows, they've assigned it to you. You have to initially pay that upfront cost, which for a startup is difficult for a lot of people. And then from that point onwards, you don't necessarily have to worry about negotiating with U of T. You can directly assign that to the company. And so I think that is one of the big things that we've struggled with in particular. As far as I don't really know if there's any additional disclosure beyond patents that U of T really wants to know about, but they obviously, in like trying to have so many incubators, like they want their researchers to get involved, and they want their researchers
Absolutely.
to be thinking about, how can their technology and their science have an impact on the world. And so I think U of T is starting to come to this place where.
How is the process? Like, is it messy? Is it figured out as you go along? Or is there like a guidebook? Or are there like consultants who actually come in and figure this out for you?
A lot of it we figured out as we went along. We got some advice from a couple of mentors at CDL who were really just like, when we're just talking about investing, this is kind of what we want to see.
The Creative Instruction Lab.
Yeah.
Rotman,
sorry. Where they really kind of were like, well, when we are thinking of investing in a company, this is typically how we want to see a company's patent portfolio. And so in listening to some of their advice, we were able to kind of go back to U of T and renegotiate some of these terms, or it's kind of all been us driven, and it's been a little bit slower than we would have liked, but we're happy with the outcome, and like moving on from that one. Yeah.
Cool. Like one of the things that tech companies have to do or should be looking into definitely is when they come out of any of U of T's incubators, a tech product, that you actually sign a waiver or form that U of T's lawyers have drafted up saying that you haven't used any significant university resource, like a supercomputer or like a laboratory like you have to build your company. Use the place to meet at. You met your co-founders here. You developed your idea here. You tested it here. You built it here. Your initial users might be here, but you haven't used actual like heavy-duty resource from the university. So the university doesn't actually own a piece of your IP, intellectual property, and the intellectual property can be worth up to about 25% of the company, right? And it's something that like the hub here is very good with Grey Grapham, like disclosing, hey, this is a thing. This is what your rights are, sign this, write at your intake so it's all clear. But with yours, I mean, you're developed a research within the university environment that you're now commercializing, right? Does U of T become a partner for the long term, or like how?
I think it depends on what you want as a startup company and a founder. And I think we very much are grateful for, it's obvious, it's my prof's work that she's been doing her entire life. And so I think there's really no way that, in my opinion, any medical device or therapeutic can be developed without such a labor-intensive research and environment from something like U of T. And so it's, I think, in a way that like, and another great example of why therapeutics and medical devices are so different from different, these different types of tech companies that you see where it costs very little money to create an app and it costs very little money to distribute that app. Really, all the money that you're raising might be for marketing, acquiring customers, and paying your employees. It's very different with medical devices. There's just so much research and that needs to be done up front to validate it and to show that it's safe. This whole idea in tech where it's, like fail fast isn't really a thing in medicine. And it can't be, because if you fail fast, you can kill people, right? So it's kind of this weird thing of like, okay, like let's fail really fast at the beginning, the very, very early stages. But then once you kind of have something at a place, like how do you develop a strategy to make sure you are going through these different validation checkboxes to
So we should have brought this up when we were talking about your initial research, but you brought us a great video here to show today, right? Some people might be listening in. We're going to be doing an audio version, so whoever's listening in can check it out on the YouTube channel. This seems to be something repairing itself.
Yeah, so this is one of our favorite visuals. It's from
Yeah.
another researcher at U of T, actually, Dr. Rodrigo Fernandez Gonzalez.
Yep.
And they do a lot of research on the fruit fly. And what makes the fruit fly very interesting in this case is when you wound the cell layer of a fruit fly, you actually see this rapid migration of these cells to close the wound. And they can heal the wound in under an hour, which is quite remarkable to think that, if you were to get a wound, you could heal that in an hour, right? Like that would be the dream. That would be, Wolverine's secret, right? And so this is something that has really kind of stayed as an inspiration for us and a model animal. And it's silly that it's a fruit fly and everyone's like, ew, but they're really great models for research.
So is this the surrounding cells come in together to close up the wound, or is it new cells coming from somewhere else?
So it's all the surrounding cells. And so because we see this wound closure in this fruit fly in under an hour, we know that it can't be from cells proliferating or dividing, because that takes way more time. And so in this video, what it really is these cells, when you wound them, they kind of take a second to recover, and then there's a whole bunch of tension which occurs between the cells, and they migrate, and they use this tension to close the wound really, really quickly and effectively.
Okay, and that, what is that tension? It's from
It's from the cells.
The cells.
The cells are the cells themselves are really strong. They're super tiny, but they're able to pack a punch, and so. These cells, when you do wound this layer, they're all connected. So in this video, the purple that you see, those are the cell boundaries.
Okay, cool.
And so those are where the two neighboring cells are, touching and interacting.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of forces between that to hold them together, and a lot of little tiny micro machineries to keep everything in place. And so when you wound that, you kind of have this loss of tension, and then these micro machineries inside the cells reorganize to rebuild this tension to close the wound. It's not favorable for any species to have a wound in their skin. It's, you have an opening or an in for any virus or bacteria to get in and to harm you. And so our cells are quite smart. They know how to live much better sometimes than humans. And so they work really, really hard to make sure that wound closes really quickly. And that's something that we want to try to mimic in humans.
So this is obviously sped up because it went by really fast in 6 seconds, but this is over 50 minutes?
It's over the time span of 50 minutes, yeah.
So what's different here between, let's say human cells, right? So you do surgery, or someone gets hurt, they get a scar, it's a big ugly bruise there for a while, right? So this is saying that this is just closing that up faster?
Yeah, so human cells can do this. They're just a little bit slower. And obviously, this fruit fly, it's this single cell layer in this instance. It's a much simpler model from humans, but there are a number of animals that are highly regenerative. And so a fruit fly, I think there's a type of salamander where if you cut its leg off, it'll grow back. You can't do that to humans.
Okay.
And so there's this big area of research that is looking at just this idea of regeneration. Why can't humans regenerate to the same capacity that other animals or other species can? Babies, actually infants, in fact, if they are cut in the wound, for instance, if there's any reason why the surgery might need to be done, they actually are able to undergo scarless healing. So there's a period in our lives where we're really, really young and tiny, where if we do get a cut, that wound will heal without a scar, and it'll undergo perfect wound healing and perfect regeneration. But as we age and as we get older, we lose that ability. And it's a vast combination of.
Do we know why?
Not really.
Yeah.
And so I think that scientists have gone and looked at different levels of different factors in infant healing versus adult healing, and there are some differences between that. It's such a complicated process, and it's super complicated to study because other than humans, there's no really accurate model to do that. And so, in an adult, for like you or me, for instance, if we were to get a cut, you typically undergo 4 stages. This is like really nitty gritty science.
Yeah.
But you'll typically undergo these 4 stages of healing. The first being something called homeostasis. And so your blood will be pouring out, hopefully not, but it'll clot and it'll clot the wound, so bleeding will stop. You have this second phase called the inflammatory phase. So all of your immune cells are now recruited to that area of the wound to remove any bacteria. And then in the third phase, you move on to proliferation. And during this phase, this is where we would kind of see some of what is occurring in this video of cells migrating to close the wound, or cells proliferating as well to help close the wound. And then finally, in the fourth phase, you have remodeling. And so hopefully, if you're a normal, healthy healing or human, this healing will progress as I just mentioned, and everything will go well. But for many humans, diseases will often impede this. And so diabetes, for instance, is a big one. A lot of people with diabetes are unfortunately prone to developing these things called diabetic foot ulcers. And these don't heal very well because of a number of different comorbidities associated with diabetes, but their wounds will often get stuck in this state where it just can't progress. And that's kind of where a lot of this motivation for new wound healing products comes from, is wanting to help these wounds and to kind of kickstart this healing and kind of push them along and help them heal.
That's awesome. So how did that become like an actual product, right? The gel. So is this that peptide you talked about that's doing this, responsible for this, like the collapsing of the cells?
So this, the peptide that we do use is present during the process of wound healing. It's not a super prominent peptide, and that was something that we think is really important, is, we're not adding this super high concentration of something that's already there and potentially having a weird dysregulation of the function. We're really just acting through a mechanical mode of action, and really just providing a platform for cells to grab onto and to hold onto and crawl to close the wound. And so similar in this case, where like if if these cells from the fruit fly, they didn't want to kind of crawl to close the wound, they would just kind of stay there. And there are ways that you can alter the fruit fly so that it won't heal. That's sometimes what happens in human wounds that don't heal. But we're thinking in providing this, this substrate, this material that these cells really like to grab hold onto. They're able to kind of hold and crawl and close the wound a lot faster than if nothing was there.
So it's like pretty much putting up a rope ladder.
Yeah, that's a really good example, yeah.
So your actual cream, or it's a hydrogel, is like the material that these peptides are hung in, like, and then when you put it on, those peptides go into your skin and give them that rope ladder, essentially?
No, so the peptides are only attached to the gel, and so it will not go in your body or anything. And
okay.
But when you apply this cream, it kind of just helps to fill the wound, and really just acts as like the material itself is the ladder.
Okay.
And if you're crawling across a rope ladder over a big gap, you could have a normal rope ladder that just has like little dingy old ropes and wood pegs, or you could have a really nice one that's like squishy and like has guardrails, and so you'd be a lot more willing to kind of crawl across that. That's kind of the similar sense. And we're really just making a nicer rope ladder.
Perfect. Okay, awesome. That makes it a little bit more visually. It makes more sense to understand what's going on there. So great. So now you have this product. Is it ready on the market? Like, what's going on there? Is it commercialized?
Not yet. We're still a little bit away, and so in order for us to get to market, we have to be able to show that we're safe on humans. And so we are proposing to do a small clinical trial to show safety, and then from that point onwards, we'll be able to get to market. And so in our product development, we're looking at about a year away from product launch. And as a strategy to kind of speed up this process, we'll be entering the market as a cosmetic, where we're not making any claims regarding healing, and so it makes it a lot easier, and there's a lot less regulatory approval for us to get on the market, but solely as a cosmetic, where people can't quite use it in these big wounds. But it's a strategy that'll allow us to get on the market, to lower the barrier to future clinical trials and to future work and to off-label use, where hopefully within a couple of years, 2 to 3 years, we'll be on the market for an actual surgical indication or a chronic wound indication.
That's amazing. So I guess like going through that process, right? Like you going as a cosmetic product and but you have the research showing that, you guys have this kind of application. Is that frustrating for you, or do you feel like this is the best way to get the word out there, right?
Yeah.
Get some revenue coming in?
I think it was definitely personally a really big learning experience, and learning that the world isn't always as I dream it to be.
Yeah.
I went into biomedical engineering with the intention of helping people and developing technology that'll have a big impact on people. And so when I started this research, and even when we started the company, we've pivoted a lot in how we are planning to get to market. We were really going after this chronic wound route. And so really wanting to put in a lot of the work, put in a lot of time and effort to do big clinical trials up front in order to get approved for the treatment of chronic non-healing wounds. But as we talked with a lot of people and saw a lot of people's faces when we talked about wounds, they kind of redirected us to to kind of think about it as a means to an end, or like, what is the lowest hanging fruit in this tree that we can get to that'll help us get one step closer. And so there was, definitely a period of time where I think I was a little disenchanted by some of the advice that we were getting. But it's good advice. It makes a lot of sense. And oftentimes, it's sometimes what you have to do in order to actually get this product to the market to help people. And so we're still a company that is committed to helping people and committed to getting a product into the hands of people that need it, but recognize that there may be a cheaper way to get there.
Yeah.
Or there may even be a least expensive or a faster way to do that by going through this different route that since we are engineers in training, we didn't necessarily see at first.
Absolutely. And I mean, this is one of the frustrating things, right? But when you see there's such a great solution you have and you want to get it out there, and these barriers that come to be to prevent that, whether it be like the learning barriers or the resource barriers, or these barriers that are put there to like slow things down.
Yeah.
Regulation, it's meant there for a good purpose, but it's harming in the same time, right?
Yeah.
By slowing you down.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating, and it's a big thing within healthcare too. And these barriers are there for a reason. There are way too many examples of companies trying to kind of get around some of these barriers to get a product to market sooner. And then this product has ended up harming people. And so that's by no means not what we want to do. And I think that's probably why we were a little sticky to it at first. But these barriers are here to protect us. It can be frustrating as a startup company when you've got very little money and are walking into these rooms and asking people for a lot of money, and they don't quite see the value that you see because you've been working on something for 2 years. But I think it's just kind of a big part of what comes with being in a healthcare startup.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a lot of emotions, right? Because I mean, you've commercialized this product, I mean, to be a business, but essentially that business is meant to fund getting real solution to real people and helping them out. That's always frustrating, right?
Yeah.
I mean, anything that slows that down. But I mean, kudos to you guys for developing such a product in the first place and really taking to where it is. But I mean, looking back at this whole process, right? I mean, companies like yours who come out of this kind of procedure, like, they're good for all of us.
Yeah.
They are actually finding solutions to problems. They're finding these problems first and then solving them, right? They're great for society in general. So we should be creating environments, and it is. The university itself, the UFT, other universities, the governments are getting more involved.
Yep.
As now the innovation economy is building, right? Like, now like the future of work is like entrepreneurship, kind of like what you guys have done, right? Craft, use your skills that you've crafted, what research at your disposal to find these great solutions to great problems, solve it, and you get rewarded.
Yeah.
And society benefits because we gain this in this one spectrum of our being, right? But how do we create a better environment?
I wrote a whole essay about this, actually.
Really? Was it published online, or where can we find this?
It was for a class in undergrad, or in my master's degree, sorry. Yeah, I've thought a lot about this, and I could make arguments like in all different directions. I think a big thing, I think our healthcare system as a whole is just inherently inherently wrong. Like it's not very good at fostering innovation, and it's not very good at adopting any new innovative devices. And so a really good example, and I should probably fact check this because it's been a couple of years since I followed this, but the Davinci Robot, for anyone that hasn't heard of it, is that big robotic surgical tool where the doctor kind of sits behind this screen. It almost looks like a cool video game. But we can do these non-invasive surgeries now, and they're really cool. And there are a lot of benefits to humans and patients for non-invasive surgeries, largely being, you no longer have to do a big incision. Healing time is often faster, and there's less scarring. But they're often really expensive for the hospitals. They take longer to set up. The procedure itself, I think, depending on the procedure, varies. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it's shorter, but oftentimes on the hospital's point of view, it's a little bit more expensive and labor intensive. And so a couple of years ago, the Ontario government ruled that it would no longer be funding any surgeries done for prostate cancer with the Davinci Robot, because they felt that there wasn't enough value in it. So even though in a patient, if they had the surgery with the Davinci Robot, they'd have reduced scarring, faster healing times. It would be a less invasive process overall. Even though there's all of these really important values to a patient, there aren't as many values to the hospital. And so the Ontario government shut it down. And so it's really quite a shame that the healthcare procedure looks at healthcare as a whole, they don't look at it healthcare as a whole. They only look at it from a single instance. And so to do this surgery with the doctor the conventional way, it's a little bit faster, a little bit cheaper. That's really all. But then to do it with the surgery, it's a little bit longer, a little bit more labor intensive, a lot more expensive because you have to buy the robot. But the patient gets out of the hospital earlier. They don't have to go through any rehabilitation. And so it's a shame that they really are only looking at it in such a narrow focus and don't quite have the ability to look at it long term. And so to answer your question after my long tangent, I think the root of this comes from trying to build a healthcare system that values innovation, and to build a healthcare system that values patient experience and recognizes that, like, we're not numbers, and we are people that want to interact with people, and we're people that want faster healing times and less scarring. And so being able to provide value in that sense would be really important. And I think that's where big, especially with Canada, being a single payer healthcare system, that's where we struggle a lot, I think, with healthcare adoption.
Yeah, that's one of the pitfalls of our system, right? As great as universal healthcare is, like the fact that we feel covered and we have to worry about, do we have insurance or not, or like take it to a hospital that can have our insurance. Like the American system is so alien to us. Like the worries they have, the anxieties there, but as it is, we get a lot of flack for our system being not efficient. I won't talk about the waiting times, but I didn't even know about that procedure that you talked about right now, right? Like,
and like, don't get me wrong, I'm super happy that we have universal healthcare. I think it is a human right to have access to that.
Absolutely.
But I just think as Canada scales, politicians haven't quite been as fast to kind of scale along with us. And scale our healthcare system.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really like talking about is one of the co-founders of AngelList. I still can't remember his name. His name is Naval. Um, he talked about this, how these tech companies are now shaving off processes that companies internally do before and make it more widespread. And I think that's really what I'm really excited to see about Canada and the institutions embracing technologies like healthcare technologies, Medicare technologies, kind of like yours. But one of the things I really like about IGAN and their mission is their portfolio of companies really solve real problems within the healthcare space. And some of them are actually going out and actually solving even the interaction between the client provider, hospitals, and the actual government system to put in place, right? So everyone's, I think, slowly chipping away at this giant problem in their own, and horizontally. But it's going to take some time.
Oh, for sure. I mean, like in the 7 years that I've been living downtown, I've seen already such a huge amount of progress in the healthcare space and in fostering an environment that really is committed to trying to take control of this and trying to say, wait, like this isn't what we want. We don't want to have to wait months for an MRI. We don't, when we walk out of the doctor's office, why do I all of a sudden feel at a loss because there's no one for me to talk to? And so it's really great to see that there are a lot of companies and a lot of spaces and a lot of investors as well that are sharing this commitment and this vision. And
absolutely. Have you put any further thought on like how this new structure would look like with these technology? Have you talked to anybody else in the space about it?
New structure of what, sorry?
Of like how the healthcare system could work a little bit better, like using technology. Have you been following the whole blockchain the movement at all about how information can be stored and shared better?
Yeah, that's I mean, blockchain is certainly one example, and I think in having I think healthcare, they're just really afraid of digital records. Estonia, I believe, actually, of all places, is really good at digital records and digital storing, and so every citizen has a number, and you can find all of your health records on that online, super easy, and it's super accessible. And so there are countries and places that have a good model. I think that a lot of it, I think maybe Canada might just be a little bit hesitant to make that full switch. The Peter Munk Cardiac Center, they have this very interesting kind of almost like two-tiered healthcare system where they have this new innovation fund that is founded by philanthropists. And so philanthropists pay money into this. And the Peter Munk Cardiac Center out at TGH hosts this incubator accelerator almost, where anyone that works within the center is able to submit a proposal for money. And so you could be a janitor all the way up to a doctor, to a researcher, and you're welcome to submit an application for this. And you'll go through a selection criteria, and they'll just give you money to immediately implement it in their hospital. And so I think that's one really interesting example of how a hospital system is trying to be more innovative and be more supportive of getting a lot of these ideas that are kind of stuck in the lab, outside of the lab, and helping to kind of ease that transition from lab to clinic.
Awesome. I mean, yeah, I can definitely see the process being progress being slowly made. But let's circle back to you again. I mean, you're from the area, right? You're from Newmarket, you said?
I'm from Newmarket, yes.
From Newmarket. And how's that been like with your family and your family and friends? Like, have they been supportive on your entrepreneurial journey? Like, are they like, wait, don't you go to study to be a scientist? Like, what's the conversation like?
My mom's great. My mom was at the Pitch to Heal on Thursday, actually, because it was the same day as my convocation. And
oh, nice.
So I think that was a really fun day for her to see kind of the closing of this one chapter, and then to see me very immersed in what my world is now. And so she's been a huge support. She's, she's a stay-at-home mom. She was always there for me. She's been my biggest cheerleader. And so she's been fantastic just at every step of the way. Even, when I went from all of these, I changed my mind constantly all through like university to the first year of my master's about like what I wanted to do. And she's been very great all the way along, just kind of listening and providing feedback. And my friends in Toronto have been awesome as well. They all work, during my master's, they were all working in industry. and they were really, really helpful in reminding me that there's more to life outside of research. And so even just them having a structured kind of, 9 to 6-ish type of job, that was helpful in me deciding that that was something that was important to me, is having balance. And so I think had it not been for them, I probably easily could have gotten lost and working ridiculous hours, working all the time. But it was really great to kind of have these people in my life that I was really close with that were working really great jobs, but weren't necessarily stuck in the lab at all hours. And they were really helpful and supportive, and have been helpful and very supportive. I wrote a huge essay in my thesis, even just thanking all these people in my life, and I'm very, very grateful. Very grateful for everyone that's been part of my story.
That's great. I mean, having that kind of support structure is very important, especially when you go on this kind of journey where there's a lot of ups and downs, a lot of pitfalls to be wary of. I mean, researchers and businessmen or business people, would seem to have the same kind of issues, right? Like how to balance work life. And our previous guest talked about this, where it's more of a work-life integration.
Yeah.
Where it's not as actually a hard stop anymore. It's about how things blend over. Because now with your mobile phone in your palm of your hand, emails and everything coming back and forth, you're obviously being bombarded back and forth during your personal time or your work time about both matters, right?
Yeah.
How's that working out for you? How are you managing the two?
There are certainly weeks where it's better than others. I think that I've thought a lot about what's really important in my life, and a big part of that, in addition to my work, are the people that are in it. And so I've noticed on weeks where work is really, really busy and I don't have time for my friends, I'll be kind of bummed out. And conversely, when work is really, really slow and I have lots of time for friends, I'll be bummed out. And so I think I've learned through trial and error and through kind of feeling these highs and lows of acknowledging that both are very important to me. Obviously, I have my phone on me all the time and will immediately know if you send me a message. And so I think just personally for myself, setting boundaries of, I don't really like to pull my computer out after dinner to do work. More than happy to send a quick email, but I probably won't be sitting working in a document super late into the night, because I know that just makes me super bummed. I won't get a good night's sleep and I won't be productive the next day. And so trying to set these boundaries for myself. And my prof and our CEO, she has a family, she has kids. And so I think even just in her also having this understanding of you can't always be working and you can't always be on your phone, because there are other people and other things in your life that need time, has also been helpful. I usually try every Saturday morning, I'll do brunch with my friends. We all live very close to each other, and so without failure, every Saturday we'll wake up, go to someone's house, make brunch, and I think that's been super helpful for my sanity.
Yeah.
Because even in those super busy days where I've had to go into the lab on the weekends, I know that at least I will get this time in with the people that I love, and I'll be able to kind of have a nice meal, sit back and relax.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, having that kind of figured out really does help things move along. I mean, how's the change been from growing up in Newmarket, right, to now downtown, working in in pretty much a startup, right? Going from going there to university.
Yeah.
You moved downtown.
I moved downtown for my undergrad. It was good. So I think my mom really loves the city, and so when I was younger, we would always come down to the city every couple of weeks and would hang out here. And so I wasn't any stranger to the city. Ironically, actually, when it came time to apply for universities, I was adamant about not applying to U of T because I think everyone is stuck up there. And my mom, thankfully, she was like, okay, well, maybe you should just, what's the harm in applying? And I'm like, fine. And then I ended up obviously spending most of my career thus far here. And so it's, it's just kind of funny that I was so quick to judge. But I think the adjustment wasn't too bad. Newmarket's super close. And so, when I was in the early years of my undergrad, my parents would still come down and like give me food or hang out with me. And then I did actually live in Boston for a year for an internship. And so that I think would be the biggest year of personal growth was I really, even though I like moved out from home, I was still very close to home. And so when I moved away to a different country, really had this moment of being like, oh, I'm on my own. I don't have anyone to, bring me leftover dinner.
Yeah.
And so I think that was kind of this very prominent moment of growth. And then when I moved back downtown to finish my degrees, I think we found this really nice balance of every once in a while grabbing lunch with my mom or my brother. But I think the adjustment has been pretty. I think I was like ready for it at the time, and so it's been pretty good.
Perfect. This is great. I think one last thing, right? We don't see like there's always talk about like there needs to be enough females in startups and STEM and all that kind of things, right? What would you say to that? We now are seeing a lot more like females-led CEOs. We're seeing a lot of like females in entrepreneurship, right?
Yep.
Do you agree with the statement? Like, do you see girls going to this more?
Slowly, yes. I know the engineering faculty at U of T has slowly started to grow. I think I kind of had a very unique experience in choosing to go into biomedical engineering.
Yeah.
I think we're roughly 50-50, which is amazing. It's what it should be. And it was really great to be in that environment. And even my lab, I think we're roughly 50-50. But that's not an accurate representation of what it's like to be in engineering, to be in any other field of engineering, to be even in any other lab. And I think it was really apparent to me when I first started pitching and I first started to go to a lot of these startup events. I think I was the only female founder at UTest my cohort.
Yeah.
And that was astonishing to me.
Yeah.
To go from this environment of knowing that like STEM or female representation is still low and seeing it a bit in undergrad and a bit in my master's, but then to walk into this room and be the only female there, I think it really hit me. And even at all of these pitches, I've been the only female that's pitched at most of the competitions.
Yeah.
And it feels a bit like a superpower. Like it feels really, I feel very empowered by it. And I acknowledge that I am at this place because I've had a lot of really strong advocates for me who have helped me get here, but it kind of bums me out a bit.
Yeah. Okay.
And so it would be really great to see more females getting involved. And I think it's slowly starting. And I think even just having, seeing more females in CEO positions makes a lot of females feel like, oh, that's a job that I could do.
Definitely.
And I don't think that a lot of people realize how important it is to see yourself in a job, in a career, in a role. And so it's a very large systemic issue. And and I think we're slowly starting to make progress, and people are starting to, the numbers are starting to get better, but it's still not good.
Yeah. Absolutely. And thank you again for coming on and talking so kindly about everything that you're doing and what the process looks like. I think we need a lot more people looking at these kind of technologies as a way to create companies, right? As to create this. So hopefully this podcast helps inspire some other people to take their research and commercialize it, or to go into this kind of field to go and find problems that can help help the world and help all of us really.
Yeah.
So I appreciate this. Thank you for coming on. Been an hour.
Thank you for having me. Right? It's been great. It's been great
Great.
chatting.
All right. Perfect. Let's cut this now. Thank you.
Thanks.